Hello everyone, welcome back to the Phoenix's Tale. I am your host Gabe, and this week we are going to be talking about Chapter 10, The Rogue Bludger. So, our recap of the chapter opens with the observation that Lockhart has given up bringing any more live creatures to class, and instead reading excerpts from his books, usually choosing Harry to help with the reenactments, and Harry puts up with it because in the last chapter they decided that, or Hermione came up with a plan that if we make some Polyjuice potion and turn into a couple Slytherins, maybe we can get close to Malfoy, because they're convinced that Malfoy is the one opening the Chamber of Secrets and causing all this trouble. So they have to keep Lockhart in a good mood to sign the slip for the book that Hermione needs, because it's in the restricted section. And it's the most potent potions, I believe, where the Polyjuice potion recipe is. It's also the first Quidditch match of the year, Gryffindor versus Slytherin, during which one of the Bludgers keeps going after Harry throughout the entire match. So in the end, he gets Oliver to tell Fred and George just to leave Harry alone. He can deal with the Rogue Bludger, just concentrate on the game. He'll deal with the Rogue Bludger and catching the snitch. And when he sees the snitch, he hesitates just a second too long, and the Bludger smashes his right arm and breaks his arm. Harry manages to catch the snitch, get back to the ground, and faints. When he comes to, he sees Lockhart standing over him saying, "Oh no, I can fix this." And Lockhart casts his spell, and instead of fixing Harry's broken arm, removes all the bones in his arm, thereby necessitating the need for Harry to spend the night in the hospital wing after drinking a dose of Skelegro so his arm will grow back. Over his stay in the hospital wing, Dobby shows up, and after a bit of a conversation, Harry finds out that it was Dobby that blocked the entrance to platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross and sent the Bludger after him, trying to get Harry to go home because of all the stuff that's going on. So Dobby knows what's going on with all of this. And before they can continue their conversation much more, Professors McGonagall and Dumbledore come in carrying what looked to be a statue, as it was written, and it turns out it was Colin Creevey trying to sneak out to go visit Harry. And our chapter ends with Dumbledore making the proclamation to Professor McGonagall and Madame Pomfrey that the Chamber of Secrets has been opened. And after McGonagall asks, well, who the hell is doing this? Dumbledore says very cryptically, it's not a question of who, but how. So Dumbledore knows who's doing this. He just doesn't know how it's being done yet. So the first thing that I want to talk about is a bit of a continuation of what we discussed last week. And it is the primary reason why it is imperative for each of us to stop worrying about the opinions of others when it comes to living your life authentically and being yourself and just doing your thing. And quite simply, in this lifetime, and this has to do with the basic truth of human existence. In this lifetime, I and every single one of you, every single human being in existence right now, every single human being who has existed, who has since died, any human being who will exist in the future, unless evolution catches up to it, we only ever experience this lifetime from within this one body with this one mind. Meaning the very specific and unique operating system that is cultivated from a combination of our inherent genetic traits, such as my being autistic, and lifetime experiences like my childhood trauma or the last 12 and a half years of PTSD that I have had no help support for at all. We do not have the ability to truly experience this life as anyone else. I, Gabe, have been Gabe since day one. I will be Gabe until the day I die. I have no clue what it means to be my son. I have no clue what it means to be my mom. I have no clue what it means to be you. I have no clue what it means to be them. That is why it is important to not worry about what other people think you should or should not be doing in your life, because you are the only one who truly knows that, because of the basic truth of human design. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to stay with me, because it's going to take some time for all the pieces to fall into place here. So what does that have to do with this chapter? Quite a bit, actually. It is specifically the part where Harry wanted to just go to the hospital wing before Lockhart accidentally removed all the bones from his arm. Now, going back to what I just said about the basic truth of human existence, once that truth landed for me, the next step I took was starting to ask myself and actually writing it down, journaling, making a list, whatever it is that works for you. Writing down everything that I wanted my life to look like. And I mean everything, from what food I want to eat on a regular basis, what types of clothing do I want to wear. We're in autumn right now here in Michigan, and we're rolling into winter. So yes, I have busted out my comfort sweat sets. I've got 4 of them. I'm going to be wearing these a lot throughout the next few months. How I want my outward appearance to be, my hair, which is kind of a mess today. I had to throw it up. Whether or not you wear makeup, etc. What I'm studying in school. Do I even want to return to school? At some point, I would like to get my PhD, but right now, I don't feel that calling. I feel that calling growing. But right now, even if I had the money to do so, I'd be like, no, I'm not ready to go back to school. Do I even want to return to school? Where do I want to live? What kind of car do I want to drive? What sort of experiences do I wish to enjoy before I die? The list is literally endless. And simply put, we each inhabit a singular experience of life. The responsibility for shaping it authentically belongs to ourselves, not anybody else. And that includes others' expectations. Oh, I don't want my parent to be upset with me for studying X instead of Y. I made a lot of decisions in my younger years for that. Or I hope my romantic partner doesn't get upset when I, with my own money, buy this car instead of that car. Because I fucking wanted this car. It's my money, I'm going to buy it. It does not matter what anybody else says or thinks about the matter. Because they do not know what it is like to be me. And that is a fundamental truth of human existence for every single one of the 8+ billion people alive on this planet today. So, for many of us, yes, myself included, I'm calling myself out on this, especially being a chronic people pleaser my entire life. We worry too much about what others think of our decisions. So it will take time to truly get to get the hang of what I'm talking about here when putting it into real world practice. It's been several years now since that fundamental truth landed with me and connected with the idea of, why should I give a shit what anybody thinks? Stick with me. Like I said, the pieces are going to fall into place. The one thing that helped me when I started making that list, and those feelings kept coming up of, oh, I hope my mom's not upset, or I'm preparing myself for listening to whatever my brother has to say because when I get the money together, I chose this car instead of that car, and it's going to take some time. And to help me move past that, I thought about it this way. And thought about how often I depended on somebody else to decide something for me and end up being disappointed. In other words, how often have you said to yourself, I should have just done it myself because the other person gets it wrong in some way? And when you find yourself muttering that to yourself, or you write something down on the list that gives you that, I really don't want that. I'd rather have this. Write the I'd rather have this on the list, because that weighed down, I don't want to say distraught, but that, just that heaviness of, that is you listening to somebody else's opinion. At least it was for me. So when you start thinking about that and you start recognizing those feelings, saying, oh, I want to be a doctor, but it just ties your stomach up in knots, write down the I would rather do this, because that's what you would rather do. Because if you're writing down I want to be a doctor, you're making a decision based on somebody else's opinion. So the example I got is just stick with me. Okay. So this is not to say that a lot of you are going to be very picky about things as much as I am. For example, last Christmas, possibly the year before, I can't remember, I requested a new bathrobe as a gift because the one that I had was over 20 years old. And my mother got the bathrobe for me as a gift. I had sent her my Amazon wish list with the robe in question all ready for her to simply add to cart, with the size and the color that I wanted. Now, knowing my mother as I do, she's not very tech savvy. I don't consider myself tech savvy, but I can figure things out. But with her, I know exactly what happened. So she didn't click the link on her phone to add to cart because I just texted her the list. What she had done is she had looked at it and then gone to her tablet with the item number and just added to cart what was pre-populated, which obviously was going to be the wrong size and color. Now, yes, I did think to myself, I should have just not said anything. I should have just used a gift card, because I think I did get an Amazon gift card from my son. I should have just done that because the size was wrong, the color was wrong. But in the long run, while I was disappointed with that, I really didn't give a shit. Okay, it's a bathrobe, and I only use it as my bath towel after a shower. So I get out of the shower, put my hair up, and then I put my bathrobe on. I don't wrap a towel around me. It's my bathrobe. So the size, it was a bit bigger than the one that I wanted. So the size didn't matter. The color, I wanted pink. It was blue that was pre-populated. I'm like, whatever. It's a bathrobe. It doesn't fucking matter. Okay. In the long run, it didn't matter. So it wasn't that big of a disappointment. But what about those are more important things? What about those that are more important to you? Okay. How often have you allowed somebody else to make a decision for you, but be what they wanted instead, thus leaving yourself to mutter to yourself, I should have just done this myself? Those are the things you need to be adding to the list in every aspect. So, like I said, anything that gives you that gut-wrenching, I just don't wanna, ignore those things, because those are the things that I learned in my experience when I first started setting out making my own list. Those are the things that I realized I didn't want to do those. I chose this or added it to the list because it was something that, it was somebody else's opinion. I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a psychologist. Or I don't want to drive this car. I would rather have the Toyota RAV4, or I'd rather have the Honda Civic. I'd rather have, instead of, you get where I'm going with this. Okay. So anything that leaves you feeling, or you don't want it, you don't want to experience that, or anything that has over the years left you think, I should have just done it myself. Any of those things that I should have just done it myself, add it to the list. So we're going to bring this back to Harry's predicament with Lockhart's ineptitude here, because Harry should have just stood up and walked away with Ron and Hermione to the hospital wing instead of lying on the ground and allowing Lockhart to fuck things up, thereby showing us how often those of us who have endured abuse from a parent or caregiver, such as I have, such as a lot of you have, such as Harry has, we tend to defer to authority to avoid conflict. So let's look at Harry's behaviors in class, because this kind of relates to it too, specifically putting up with being Lockhart's scene partner for his reenactments, specifically about people pleasing and authority compliance. And again, a lot of psychology references in the show notes. Harry tolerates Lockhart's ego because he wants something in return. Revealing behavior driven by extrinsic motivation and fear of confrontation, which aligns with research on authority, obedience, and submissive social coping styles, often reinforced in childhood. So here comes the psychology. So authority obedience is a concept in social psychology that refers to individuals' tendency to follow orders or conform to directions given by someone perceived as an authority figure, even if those orders conflict with personal morals or cause harm to others. The most famous demonstration of this principle came from Stanley Milgram's obedience experiences at Yale University in the 60s. And I do vaguely remember reading about the Milgram study. In Milgram's study, participants were instructed to administer what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to another person when that person answered questions incorrectly. Despite the apparent distress of the learner, the one administering the shock, most participants continued delivering shocks up to the highest levels when urged by the authority figure in a lab coat. The results showed that about 65% of participants fully obeyed the authority's instructions, even though they believed their actions were harming another person. Milgram concluded that ordinary people are surprisingly willing to obey authority figures, particularly when they perceive those figures as legitimate, feel distance from the consequences of their actions, and view themselves as agents carrying out someone else's directive. So there's an emotional distance between, oh shit, I'm harming somebody, and I'm just doing what I'm told. It's how we get into trouble a lot of times. I was just doing what I was told. Rather than as individuals personally responsible for harm. 65% did not think of themselves as causing harm to the person receiving the shots. As for submissive social coping styles, submissive social coping styles describe patterns of behavior where individuals manage interpersonal stress by yielding, complying, or deferring to others to avoid conflict or rejection. These patterns develop early in life, often as adaptive strategies to maintain safety or approval in environments where expressing needs or defiance led to negative consequences. Submissive social coping styles. A couple weeks ago, remember I shared the story about what it was like having these social activities such as the annual company picnic that my father's employer would put on every year. That was redundant, sorry. Annual company picnic that my father's employer would provide. And being yelled at because I expressed a need. I expressed something to my father. He yells and shouts at me, tells me, there's people you can talk to, even though they were grown women. And I was 12, 13, 14 years old. Yeah. In Schema Therapy, this would fall under the surrender coping style, specifically the compliance dependence schema. People with this coping pattern rely heavily on others, giving in easily, seeking affiliation, and trying to maintain harmony by being agreeable or people-pleasing. Yeah, I shut my mouth after that. Anyway, in short, this alleviates anxiety and prevents confrontation, but over time it reinforces underlying schemas of inferiority, emotional deprivation, or fear of abandonment. From a broader psychological view, submissive coping overlaps with Karen Horney's concept of moving toward people in her theory of neurotic needs, where individuals seek safety by becoming compliant, overly empathetic, or accommodating, sacrificing their own authenticity to secure a connection. I want to take a moment out here to say something. As somebody with the mess of coping styles and trauma responses, the two we're going to talk about are my pattern recognition from being autistic and the hypervigilance that developed in childhood because we never knew what was walking in the door when my father got home from work every day. We never knew what was going to set him off. We were walking on eggshells literally my entire childhood. When I see people collecting friends, what I just talked about moving toward people in her theory of neurotic needs, where individuals seek safety, they seek safety in numbers. By being compliant, overly empathetic, or accommodating, sacrificing their own authenticity to secure connection. So to me, on the outside looking in, yes, I do know the difference between being an introvert and being an extrovert. Not quite talking about the same thing here. There are a couple people of note just on TikTok. Not going to name them because I don't like shaming people like that. But a couple people who seem to have a lot of friends. A lot of friends. And I'm not just talking about followers on social media. I'm talking about in their own lives, what they show on social media. And that's what I think of, is that they're really insecure. And there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of stuff going into that. Whereas me, I find safety in my solitude, and moving forward, having been as socially isolated as I have, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, I am going to be a lot more discerning about who I let into my life moving forward. I want to make sure I have the right people, and I feel more comfortable being authentic, being vulnerable, and all the things you need to do to have a successful relationship. Again, doesn't matter what kind. Platonic, romantic, personal, business. But the ones that seem to have a lot of friends, to me, always seem like they're hiding something. I know where I'm trying to go on this, but specifically that last part about reinforcing underlying schemas of inferiority, emotional deprivation, and fear of abandonment. Yeah, I see that in those people. The two that I'm thinking of that just seem to have a lot of friends and call everybody a friend right off the bat, when the fact is they're really not. So, when chronic submissive coping can contribute to stress-related mental health challenges, when chronic submissive coping can contribute to stress-related mental health challenges such as anxiety, depression, and low self-efficacy, as studies note positive correlations between submissive coping scores and their internalizing distress. So, we're going to wrap this chapter out by returning to Harry's behaviors in this chapter under these two ideas from a more psychological perspective. And I found something really interesting on this. So, and as always, I use my favorite ChatGPT tool, Perplexity, to help me kind of wrap my head around it and be able to explain it to you in a way that makes sense. So Harry's behavior in the Rogue Bludger, this chapter we're talking about, illustrates a complex interplay between authority obedience and submissive coping. Throughout the chapter, Harry endures Lockhart's dramatized performances and misplaced confidence because he wants Lockhart's signature for Hermione's book, or for Hermione's sake, so she can get that book from the restricted section to make the polyjuice potion. That tolerance is a textbook display of authority obedience that we talked about earlier. The willingness to appease perceived authority. Lockhart's authority is definitely perceived by him, even at personal discomfort, rooted in the belief that confrontation risks loss of reward or social harmony. In this case, the loss of a reward. If he doesn't put up with this shit with Lockhart every time he has to go to defense against the dark arts, Lockhart's not going to sign Hermione's slip, so she's not going to be able to get the book out of the restricted section so she can make the polyjuice. But it also hints at the beginnings of submissive coping, learned patterns of deferring to others' control in order to preserve stability or approval. Harry instinctively prioritizes pleasing Lockhart and maintaining order over asserting his needs, even though he recognizes Lockhart's incompetence. And that same compliance emerges again when Lockhart removes Harry's bones. Rather than resist and just stand up and head to the hospital wing, fuck you, Lockhart, I'm going to have Madame Pomfrey fix my broken arm. Harry quietly accepts the pain and humiliation, subconsciously perpetuating a dynamic common to those who conflate self-worth with obedience. His failure to speak up is not a weakness. It's a learned form of self-protection, one cultivated in environments such as with the Dursleys, where defiance equaled punishment. In psychobehavioral terms, Harry exhibits submissive social coping, tolerating harm to avoid conflict. The irony is that this very impulse to endure authority's harm silently contrasts very sharply with his framed bravery in battle. I think we all remember the end of Sorcerer's Stone. Harry hung on till the very end, and Dumbledore said, "No, dude, you almost died." Okay. Harry is very good in battle. Okay. So why wouldn't Harry just stand up, tell Lockhart to fuck off, and just head to the hospital wing with Ron and Hermione to have Madame Pomfrey fix his arm? Okay. That is the social compliance that we were talking about. Submissive social coping is the term. Yet, as this chapter reveals, courage is easier in combat for Harry. It is. than in moments requiring self-advocacy. In other words, the difference between Harry's determination in dealing with the Rogue Bludger himself, that would be another example of being brave in battle, during the Quidditch match, and his less than pushy attitude about going to the hospital wing to fix his broken arm. Okay. Lockhart's fraudulent bravado further sharpens the contrast. He is the archetype of performative power, while Harry represents the quiet endurance conditioned by authority. Read together, their interaction becomes a microcosm of how trauma, people-pleasing, and misplaced obedience, thank you, Dursleys, can suppress autonomy until pain itself forces transformation. Thankfully, as the entire series progresses, I would personally argue that Harry does not succumb to the outright people-pleasing behaviors due to the fact that he does, in fact, have an incredible support system from those in his social circle versus those of us who never did in childhood or other times of abuse or trauma. And a lot of people out there still don't have that support. So I think that support for Harry very early on, being 11 years old and having best friends right away that he trusts and he can talk to about all of this stuff is definitely a key difference between his experience and my experience. Okay. That was a lot. Yeah. So I'm just going to end things here. Before I do, I want to mention one final personal note. And that is that my life is slowly getting better since I really begun looking at my life moving forward and what I want it to look like. I do hope that you will take what I have shared and apply it to your own, especially if you struggle or are struggling with the after effects of abuse and trauma and are currently not living your life the way you want it to be. Remember, you are only ever going to experience this life from your own perspective, thus making the opinions of anyone else null and void. So what do you want? And when you start answering that question, you start writing it down, you start really thinking about it. When you get stuck in thinking about someone else's disappointment as to why you maybe added or omitted something from your list, remember that you should do those things. Like I said earlier, anything that you write down that makes you feel like, I don't want to do that and I don't want to do all the things to get me there, you're living for somebody else's opinion in that. Write down the, oh, I'd rather do this. Write that down. Okay. And remember that you should do those things. Do the things that, I don't want to do this, I want to do that. Or I don't want to have this in my life, I want to have that in my life. I want to have that things. Such as making this decision for yourself. The whole point of this and the whole point of my social media content, when I can get past this mental break and get back to it, I'm working on it. The whole point of this is just to share what I've been through, where I am now, where I want to go, and how I overcame, how I healed, how I've survived a lot of the shit that I survived. That is all I'm doing, is sharing it. And if anything pops up that sounds interesting to you, like, oh, Gabe did this and blah, 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 I should give that a try too. Don't copy me word for word, step by step. Modify it for yourself. But if it is something you haven't tried that sounds like, oh, I might actually get some healing from this, I might actually feel better in some way if I do things, if I do this, just like Gabe did when she was dealing with the same thing I'm dealing with, or a similar thing that I'm dealing with. I am simply giving you options. Because I firmly believe that the only way you are ever going to know if you really truly want something, whether it's something tangible, whether it's an experience, are you going to enjoy it? Are you any good at it? The only way you're going to know is to actually fucking do it. So do it. If it doesn't work for you, A, that's not my fault. Okay? B, it's not your fault. It's just something that didn't work and you might have to tweak it. At the very least, even if you outright reject something specific that I did to help myself that really worked, as long as it sets you on a path to finding what will work for you, that's what I'm hoping all of you get from all of this. And that's why I'm sharing this. And that's why you will never hear me say, you have to do what I tell you to. But do what works for you. I'm just sharing what's worked for me, if that makes any sense. So, like I said, I feel like I'm not going to be able to say this enough until it finally clicks for you, but you should do the things that when you start listing how you want your life to look, you should do the things, you should buy the things, you should whatever. The things that if you write something down, I don't want to do the things to get there. I'd rather do this. Write down the I'd rather do this. Or, you're hearing somebody, you're struggling to write something onto your list. I really wanna, but no, get rid of the but. I really wanna, period. Write it on the list. Okay. So that's it for this week. In comparison to last week, this is a much shorter episode. So last week was a bit of an anomaly because I really kind of got on got into a rant on something that I'm extremely passionate about. So anyway, we're going to wrap this up this week. Next week, we are going to talk about Chapter 11, The Dueling Club. For those not familiar with the story, this is going to be a good chapter. And this is where things get interesting for Harry, in the book at least. So until then, be sure to watch out for them bludgers, man. Those bludgers are no joke. So have a good week, everyone. I'll see you next time.